not that this would be good for...
Yeah.
It'd actually be really bad for us.
But
Yeah.
in theory,
Really
yeah.
bad.
In theory,
But-
yeah.
It'd be great for me. I'd be holding the Bitcoin.
Okay, welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of Table in Latin. You probably have to Google that, but it is the officially unofficial, right? Mensa podcast. And so what does that mean? So we're all in this organization called Mensa. Mensa is the High IQ Society. We're kind of smart, I guess. I'm Ben Clark. My favorite color is vermilion, and I really like pizza. This is Joel Michalak.
Again, you have to face the microphone when you're talking.
This is Joel Michalak. He is my technical director for Table in Latin, which means he's set up everything here, does everything here, will edit everything here. So really,
Wait,
this
I'm
is his
editing
podcast?
This is how Ben pitched this to me.
Yeah.
He was like, hey, I want to make like a Mensa podcast. Do you want to be like the technical producer? I was like, so you want to use all my equipment? And he's like, yeah, and we'll shoot it at your apartment. I was like, so basically I'll do all the work and then you'll be the spokesman? And he's like, exactly. And I was like, okay, I'll get the widest lens I have to capture your ego.
And here we are. So Mensa, we got to go into what that means a little bit because a lot of people have different ideas of like what Mensa is as an organization. And everybody who joins it joins for a different reason. I myself joined it because I didn't think I could get in, honestly. Like, I was hanging out with a lot of people in the organization. I was attending a lot of groups. I was attending a lot of group events within Mensa, and people assumed I was a member, and it kind of felt dirty. So I wanted to see if I could get in. I did, and you don't get an IQ, like, score when you get in. So I don't really know, but I'm positive I am, like, the bare minimum. So it's possible, people. You can get into Mensa. I had this idea that it was, like, some sort of, like, Illuminati governmental control, but really, we just sit around and drink, and it's pretty great. Joel, what was your impressions of Mensa? Joel!
Yeah.
Joel, what was your impressions of Mensa before you joined?
I had a friend in high school that like made a joke of like, oh, well, why don't you join Mensa? And I didn't know what that was. And then he told me about it. And then like 6 years later, I was like, maybe I should try. Because a lot of times you think you're smarter than you probably are. And I actually wanted to disprove myself that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. So I took the exam and then I got in and I was like, fuck, I have to do something with my life.
Such a burden.
Yeah, it's like I actually lost a lot of hope for humanity when I was like, wait, I'm the smart one?
Yeah, it's a reality check for sure.
Yeah, but I do want to say that IQ is just a test of one form of thinking, and it's mostly about pattern recognition and being able to learn quickly. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have better abilities than other people. There are other things than IQ that matter.
Yeah, like sick gains.
If you're not watching the video podcast, you're missing out why Ben wanted video on this podcast. And it's because he spends several hours at the gym.
I'm not even wearing a tank top. Like, this could be so much worse.
Yeah.
I
can't talk.
Yeah, I know. I
Several
didn't want to
pictures.
distract too many people.
There's several pictures of me with my shirt off on the internet. So.
Yeah. I mean, same.
Yeah.
It's literally my whole Instagram, so. And then, we joined Mensa for different reasons. We're in it because we've met a lot of really cool people in Mensa, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to showcase with this podcast, with Joel, who I met through Mensa, who really hated me when he first met me, and now here we are several years later, where I'm still suspicious that he still really hates me, but tolerates me for some reason. And
This is my power play. This is my move. It's just making people feel really uncertain how I feel about them.
It works.
I have no close friends, but everybody that I know is just a little uncertain about
like
how much I like them.
When's he gonna skin me?
Mm.
When am I gonna die? And so that's the podcast. I hope everybody likes it moving forward. I wanted to showcase some of the really cool people that I've met in Mensa and the really cool things they do. One of them today is my friend Jason Civalleri. So let's get into Jason really quick. He's a professor of law at the University of New Hampshire. Went to UC Irvine for law. Also got an MBA. Is compliance at My Crypto, and most impressively for me, paid off all of his student loans via cryptocurrency. You are the founder of Split, but you aren't anymore?
Yep.
And
sold out of that operation. I'm involved with My Crypto, my Ether wallet. For any crypto nerds that might be listening, Bitmain. Right now I'm raising for Hive One, which is a cool project. And then, just generally doing legal guidance and publishing throughout the community, trying to keep people out of jail until the revolution begins.
That's a big thing too, especially with Bitcoin, is trying to keep people out of jail because they don't pay their taxes on it. And then
that's the least of the worries. You didn't pay your taxes? That's all? All right, we can work with
cool,
that.
We're good.
Yeah.
Wait, so before we get into everything else, what would be some of the other worries other than not paying your tax? I thought that would literally be the be all and end all of it.
Oh, there's so many. I mean, so the big one right now is securities law. I would rather get caught not paying my taxes than accidentally defrauding myself selling securities.
Oh, okay.
So you get into really nuts and bolts kind of boring legal stuff. But outside of what people actually pay me for, I think one of the real fun ones is the sex trafficking and sex workers.
Yeah.
I work with a couple companies that cater specifically to sex workers and navigating all of those types of laws, keeping the girls out of trouble while still clean and in compliance, but also giving them more feasible payment options than using PayPal or banks that tend to shut them off once they find out they're working in that field.
High-class escorts.
Yeah. And it can be adult stars, it can be strippers. It's just a whole branch of entrepreneurs. They know how to make a lot of money, and there's a lot of reasons right now why they end up getting oppressed through sex trafficking or pimps or that type of stuff, and a lot of it actually has to do with banking or finance.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll get into that later for sure, because that's like one of the major things I want you to talk about, because I know that's your passion.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's where we are right now. For everyone, including myself, I actually had Bitcoin. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I'm not going to say how much I had or how many I sold, but it was cool, and I liked it. But now I don't know anything about it anymore, and I really feel like I didn't know anything about it to begin with. So explain in the best, most concise way you can how cryptocurrency works and how people can use it.
Most people that I talk to at this point have heard of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And they think of cryptocurrencies. They're like, okay, is this thing going to replace the Fed? No longer use dollars? Sounds like bullshit to me. And it is. Yeah. Totally is. Yeah. That was the original iteration, was Bitcoin. But what Bitcoin really did, even though it was trying to be a world currency, was it created a method to keep a record that is accurate and trustable and is capable of making some programmatic operations without anyone running it. So there's no central control, there's no custodian, there's no Amazon, any company in between. And that's never happened in history. Moses was writing things on slates back in the day. Yeah. We don't have those slates anymore. It's not like there's an immutable record that we can go to and say, oh, there's the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
That's just never existed in the history of humans. And recently, we've paid a lot of money to people to do that for us, and sometimes turns out they don't do it perfectly. Yeah. And so that's the real core of this whole blockchain, is just having this sort of like a natural resource of record keeping out there that we can all depend on and all have ways to write to under certain rules. And as long as everyone's following those rules, no one can mess with it, no one can change it, and no one's charging for it.
Yeah.
And so that's the big excitement about this. And so the first use case was money, and you can think of that, you hear decentralized ledger or distributed ledger, and Satoshi Nakamoto is cause of that. He was following the digital cash movement with the cypherpunks. He was just the next step in about 30 years of evolution there.
Is he a real person? Did we ever figure that out?
No. Who knows?
Yeah.
At this point, I'd almost prefer that nobody finds out.
Yeah.
And there's a couple people who claim to be him. They're actually suing people who say, no, you're not Satoshi. And now they're going to court about it. So that'll be kind of interesting. But yeah, we don't really know who created it. There's a few theories that might hold water. One of them is a real famous cryptographer who died in 2014. So we may never know. And,
we'll just say it's him because that makes it really easy.
I just say it's Jesus. Jesus came back, gave us this new physical capability we couldn't do.
And you've been raptured out of student debt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he sees the world. He's like, man, there's one thing I missed, And he's like, here, guys, here's this immutable record thing you can all use. Now go fix yourselves. And it kind of feels that way sometimes. And so that's the basics of it. We can get into node sharing on a P2P network and all that. That's boring. What it is, you can submit it to a source, and it's not called Dropbox, it's not called Google, it's not called the housing department or the Fed. It's just something anyone with a computer can write to and have access to that's like the internet but not hosted anywhere. And that's essentially it.
I know we're all in Mensa here, but I understood 10% of what you just said. But that's good.
Sometimes,
I totally got it.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Imagine writing something down and no one can erase it. That's more or less it.
I got you.
Including yourself, by the way.
So I wanted to know, because you've been doing this professionally for a long time, and before that, I remember you telling me some really cool stories about stuff you've done personally with crypto. So don't implicate yourself in anything, but what's the coolest thing you've done utilizing cryptocurrency or crypto in general or blockchain or whatever?
And there's a number of them. For the most part, it's pretty lame. I mean,
okay, well, not those. The coolest thing.
The coolest one. It's cool to me. Someone makes a piece of art and then securitizes it online. You can buy a piece of the art and then display. You have the rights to display it on your website. And that's just a system that wasn't there before, where you could trade it between people and you didn't have some rights manager in between you. In actual practice, you watch me do it. It's really boring. You're like, God, those look like Tamagotchis. Like, why are we doing this? Is this 1998? And yet I'm sitting here. I'm like, wow, we created digital scarcity of something beyond Bitcoin. Like, this is really cool. And so a lot of that kind of stuff. I think the other side of it is just random stuff getting flown in by the government of Kuwait to be their personal guest of the royalty in Kuwait.
Oh, that's cool.
Teach them, here's how to start thinking about smart contracts and regulation. And you go into a country where they can't drink, there's no alcohol or anything like that. There's no pornography. It's all blocked off in the country. You can't say anything bad about Allah or Muhammad. You can't say anything bad about the royal family. Like, all right, so come help install a censorship-free technology that can just totally circumnavigate all the rules that they have in place for that.
It's like they're asking you to come into their country and install a system that can completely deregulate their entire government
and change their culture.
And change their culture and change everything about them. So it's you're like, okay.
And they get those questions. They're like, well, so how do we maintain that no one talks bad about Allah? I'm like, don't use blockchain. I don't know what else to tell you.
It's really okay. That's cool.
So it's interesting. And they're super nice about it.
That's cool.
So yeah, a lot of stuff like that. And to be doing that in your 20s is pretty awesome.
No, I'd definitely say that's a lot better than what I did, which was play World of Warcraft.
That's
literally my entire 20s. Let's see, just to get a better handle on everything really too, because you were talking about earlier about how blockchain and Bitcoin and everything had the potential to completely remove the Federal Reserve and replace money and all that shit. Can you explain to people the difference between what Bitcoin was trying to be and what a government issued fiat currency is?
At the end of the day, all decisions, right? Maybe not all decisions, but most decisions, including at the governmental level, is some level of guessing. Maybe you're backing it up with statistics and that type of stuff. And so for the last 150 years, we've had governments trying to figure out what to do about money. And every 30 years ago, they screw up and they change everything around and then they try again and it screws up 30 years later. And that's more or less it. And that's where we are. And the last one we had was really bad. That was about 10 years ago. And out of the ashes of that, someone says, all right, what if we don't have humans doing it? What if we have robots doing it? And he's like, I built this thing. Here you go, guys. And that was kind of it. It was rather than having some group of people saying we're going to raise or lower interest rates to, increase or decrease the currency supply and all of that kind of stuff, we're just going to have all of our computers coded saying we're going to release 5 of them every 15 minutes or whatever. And that's it. And on one side it sounded really attractive. It's like, oh man, I hate these humans. I just lost my house in this housing collapse.
Yeah.
On the other side, you're like, wow, your robot really sucks. That's kind of the back and forth, and so, one of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin, which was the first one that came along, is that it's just so volatile, you could never use it as cash,
Yeah, because it would fluctuate so much in between every day, like people would just hold on to it.
Yeah.
That's when I was doing it back in, I don't know, like I think I bought some in like 2012. I held on them for a couple of years, but it's just like this constant giant fluctuation. It's like you might as well just hold on to it because you could literally have $10,000 more tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would you buy something today? Like that guy that bought the pizza for like 20,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's like he would have been like a multi-billionaire or some nonsense. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the gist of it. And so when you look at Bitcoin and you've got some really smart people who come in, they're like, all right, well, it's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account, it's all these things that you could describe money as.
Yeah.
And you actually look at it and you're like, it's a terrible store of value. It's a terrible medium of exchange. It's a terrible unit of account. Let's try again, guys. And so right now we're starting to see a little bit of a comeback where everyone is saying, all right, the whole world's going to be decentralized. We're all going to be in anarchist paradise and everything's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see a little bit movement like, okay, guys, anarchy kind of sucks.
Yeah. It's actually not great for giant government managing. It's like, it's good for like 2 people. Great. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of pushback now to start figuring out what would be the sensible ways to bring in some human control so that ultimately we can get some board of people that are guessing what money's going to do tomorrow and setting the rate of Bitcoin or something like that. So I think that's kind of the dual end to it is the use cases we've already seen that started to work in very high degree are very simple things. I'll take a stock certificate and I'll, rather than having a piece of paper or have it registered with the transfer agent, put it on the blockchain as a token.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's on one side, it's already picking up. It's going real quickly. On the other side, it's like, that's not the big revolution we were promised. You're just making Wall Street more money. It's the exact opposite of what everyone was expecting. Yeah, and if you get into Bitcoin, it was designed by an engineer who really did some amazing stuff from an engineering standpoint, but had a very basic understanding of monetary policy. And so the question is, just the fact that we have a shared record, is that what will solve the Fed's problems, or can we start incorporating AI and all that, or at the end of the day, is this all kind of BS on the money front? We should start focusing on other things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are, where we came from.
So we're trying, so it's all circled back around. Like we're trying to find a way to incorporate the revolution that Bitcoin created while still utilizing the human control that is the Fed.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a very hardcore. It used to be libertarian in the early days, but you've gotten this really hardcore sort of Marxist socialist side that has come and started playing ball too. And it's the same thing. They hate centralized power. They hate authoritarians. Under a pure Marxist thought, not Soviet or something like that. And there's a very strong case for why this could be used in sort of an egalitarian way. So you got them holding hands with libertarians fighting on all this, and if you say the word Donald Trump, everything goes to shit.
Yeah.
But
most people try to avoid saying those 2 words together.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So it is kind of fascinating where everyone's like, all right, how can we remove these, sort of barriers that allow small groups of people to really advance themselves in society, whether it's corporate or governmental. Is there a way we can free this and make everything more fair? And and that's the big thing. Everyone is kind of fighting for a revolution, and we're just waiting for the day that, I don't know, someone steals a tank and puts it on Bitcoin, and there it goes or something.
Yeah. Okay, well, if somebody stole it, it's actually a really funny example. If somebody stole a tank and put it on Bitcoin...
What does that mean?
Well, it's not even like, what would that mean? Like, how would that work? Like, it's like...
I don't know. That's...
I'm just like, that's kind of cool. I want a tank. How can I get a tank?
Oh, that was actually the original vision for Split. What we did was... So you had Bitcoin, which was sort of the first wave, and then you had Ethereum come along, and that was the second wave. And Ethereum was invented by a 19-year-old in Canada, Vitalik Buterin, and he said... we've got this whole system of keeping track of quantity that you can keep a record of. That's trustable. How can we expand this into all of the normal computer operations that any cell phone or computer currently does? It's not just simple adding and subtracting on a ledger. And so he invented a whole new programming language that would allow fully, Turing complete, which means you can do anything that you can do with any other computer on something that can run in a distributed system where you have each computer sending signals, and you have thousands of computers in the system, and that can actually take minutes or days for it to populate correctly. How do we combine those two things? And so that's what Ethereum is sort of a world computer, as they sometimes call it, to keep track of, I own this, I have this much money, and I want to do this, and it's all programmed into it to do it.
So it's like a world bank?
It's a world computer, and that's really what computers are.
Yeah.
Is they compute.
Yes.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Yeah. And so what we built on it, or at least our initial goal, was we took these things called smart contracts. A smart contract is basically you write out a series of directions, or for a non-lawyer, you could call it a contract, saying if this happens, then I'll pay you that. It's similar to coding, it's similar to contracts, and you can run these digital assets through it. And so what we were trying to do with Split was use a smart contract to run a timeshare service, where you could timeshare anything. So let's say you want a Lamborghini, but you only got, you can't afford a Lamborghini, but you got $5,000 in the bank.
Yeah, so you'd timeshare the Lamborghini with like 50 other people.
Yeah, and so you could keep that record of who are all the owners, how much percentage, and then you could even come up with a system for them to bid on time during the year.
Yeah.
And then now you can track the ownership and usage rights of that Lamborghini. Now, of course, there's all kinds of stuff still there. It's like, how do we get it so that we know that the person who has the rights now has the key, and stuff like that. How do we get the car from here to the next guy? Those are the harder problems. But just for managing the ownership and usage rights, that was the goal of Split. So yeah, that's what a lot of people wouldn't think of as a financial application.
Well, yeah, it's because everybody thinks of cryptocurrency. My camera. Everybody thinks of crypto and everything as just like it's money replacement. They don't think of all these other uses that it could possibly have.
Right. Yeah. I think that kind of demonstrates some of the functionality of really how flexible this is.
Yeah.
Is being able to do it in a DApp where rather than running Twitter on your phone, everyone's running Twitter on their phones, and everyone's even running your account, but you're the only one that can change it. And now Twitter doesn't have the ability to go censor tweets or go and sell your data off for marketable revenue, that type of stuff. So that's some of the higher level, like how are we trying to solve some of the big problems of today using this new technology.
That's kind of amazing. You put it like that, it makes it really do. Like I really want to buy into like this utopia. I'm like, how can we make Twitter not be complete assholes? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Like that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and you see Mark Zuckerberg go in front of Congress and everyone's yelling, dude, Ethereum! Like, the screens. But...
I would like to address, whenever you introduce new technology, like there's the idealistic viewpoint of it, and then there's also like how people game it to just totally fuck up everything.
Be the worst ones in the next iteration.
Yeah, so it's like what this technology is going to bring also brings a bunch of other consequences. So you have like the dark web and people using Bitcoin to buy illegal things. Some which can be argued are illegal unjustly, and then some that most people would agree are not great. Do you see any way to address those issues while still maintaining the idealistic views of what you see the technology?
Basically, he's asking you the same question the Saudis asked you,
or kind of. Yeah. And for starters, the way to do it is, get a crystal ball, and know exactly what the problems are. A running joke we have is like, hey, oh shit, we just built Skynet. Like, great, we got rid of the Fed, and now we have robot overlords, that are, But I mean, even if you take it a couple steps back, you think of democracy in the 1700s was this way to decentralize the power that was held in a king or a monarchy. Yeah. And here we are 200 years later being like, oh man, that government's too centralized. And, you give 200 years to people who want to exploit it and figure out how to bend the rules. And things change in ways that you probably couldn't have predicted in 1776. And so, same thing's kind of going on here. But to address some of these social ills that you're talking about, I'm of the mindset that if criminals are using it, it means it works. Because they are the most private, they're the most self-conscious, they're the ones that know that have the most on the line. And if they're willing to risk their entire literal freedom, life, using this in order to accomplish whatever their illicit goal is, it means it works. Like, for better or worse. Yeah, so I mean that's what's kind of interesting. Everyone says, well, drug dealers use Bitcoin. I'm like, well, then why don't you?
Why don't you?
Yeah, like exactly. They know what they're doing. Like they're making more money than you. They're probably making more of an impact on the world, positive or negative, than you. Like there's something going on here if you've got really sketchy things popping up with it first. So yeah, the questions of like how do you stop illegal child pornography, for example, that's one that comes all the time. We're taking the viewpoint of, hey, we're building finance. Like we're not going to solve the world's problems here. There's always going to be some sketchy things going on, but if you're seeing it happen, that means it's working. And it's really sort of a positive test case for
you don't think there's any ethical pressure for the technology industries to try to take those things into account?
Oh, there is, and we do, and it's something we think through. And there's projects that I work on where they would be arguably things that other people would consider are illicit use cases, and we're looking at it and we're like, all right, well, what makes it illicit? Why are the reasons you don't like it? Can we solve some of those, even if we're promoting the general practice itself, type of thing? So you've got some more wiggle room on that side. And then on the other side of it, it's sort of at what point, where does the buck stop? Ultimately, all of this wouldn't be possible if Vinsurf hadn't invented TCP/IP. So, did he have an ethical question that, hey, we got this TCP/IP layer, no one has their names attached to their IP addresses, and this is the big conversation in the early 90s. Yeah. Did we just unleash the beast on, just freeing up the ability to share child pornography and monetize it? And the answer is yes, and they knew it. It was coming way back then. But should we not have done the internet? Yeah. And so that's kind of the thought on it, is that
it comes down, it's like a human problem. It's like humans have to solve their own like problems with themselves and wanting these things, and they have to police themselves, because you can't. It's like the technology allows you to do so many great things, but it also allows you to do some bad things. We can't basically stunt the technology, because there's also a potential for bad things. Basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And it turns out a lot of the criminals have the same problems as what we'd call legitimate people. Yeah. And so if we solve those problems, of course more criminal people will do it. And going back to what I said, I think that they'll be the first ones to realize it too.
I have one question about the technology with criminals using it. This is just something that I don't understand about the security of Bitcoin. So there's a record, this is why people like it, is that there's a constant record. But why do criminals like to use this if there's a constant record?
Yeah, that's funny. So speaking to laymen, I just talk about criminals using Bitcoin. No criminals use Bitcoin anymore. They use Monero because it doesn't have the tracking, public tracking. It's a total privacy-oriented anonymous token that it's, talking to some of the higher ups at the DEA and at the FBI and that type. They're like, I hope all the criminals use Bitcoin. We've got that covered. Like, we're done with that. Like,
we figured that out a couple years ago. Yeah,
we'll let a little happen on Silk Road. Anyone gets over this size, we bust them. We've got their number on speed dial. I just hope no one discovers Monero, because that's the real hardcore ones. And now all the drug exchanges do have both Bitcoin and Monero, and they're catering the more tech savvy drug dealers. They're using Monero, and the less tech savvy are still using Bitcoin.
If any criminals are listening, Bitcoin is what you want to use. Do not use
if any criminals are listening, use, what is it, Monero? We need to get this shit going.
Well, I'm also, in full disclosure, I hold a lot of Monero, so please use it.
Use it for things.
I was just trying to cover myself ethically.
There you go. But so and that's what's interesting was Bitcoin was Silk Road, and they busted him through the least technological way possible. Yeah. They hunted down some old message board posts he made, and then hunted him down through the mail service. That was ultimately how they got him. But nowadays the Bitcoin, if you combine it with the fact that any exchange in the US has KYC AML, you have to put on your name whenever you transfer from fiat to fiat's normal money, dollars. Not this magical.
Not the car.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of see these extensions of it where everyone's still talking about Bitcoin in the main line. I'm even wearing Bitcoin socks at the moment, but in reality, like, there's some much more advanced stuff to get away with things, and Bitcoin's no longer contributing. It's not really contributing to anything, but it's not contributing to criminals anymore. It's gotten outpaced. Sorry, Jameson Lops and Mensa too. I should probably apologize to him because he's a very hardcore pro Bitcoin guy and very respectable, and will probably disagree with most of the stuff I just said. So.
That's cool. I mean, like we were talking earlier, totally just keeping this inside the Mensa thing. I knew one person in Mensa named Jameson. I'm surprised there are two.
Yeah. Yeah, Jameson runs the Bitcoin SIG. He's one of the most prominent, what they call Bitcoin maximalists.
That sounds so cool. Like he's a Roman gladiator or something.
It's exactly like a Roman gladiator, but mostly happens on Twitter, and everyone blocks each other. And like,
so it's like everyone else on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's good to know that like it's funny because people still don't understand Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is essentially already been left in the dust 5 times by like a bunch of other things. And that's just great. I love it.
What's fascinating is whenever one of the new ones comes up, it gets a bunch of value, and yet Bitcoin goes up too.
Yeah.
Everyone buys Bitcoin and X, whatever the new one is.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, because like I still watch Bitcoin, and it did lose a lot of value over the last year. But I think recently somebody just bought like 12,000 of them, so it went up like another like $1,500. So it's like people still use it and think there's a future in it and still want it to succeed, or it would have went to zero.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
And I think at this point, the fact that there's an industry, there's people who have, like me, that have a career, that's banking on it.
Yeah.
They're going to fight to make sure it doesn't die all the way.
Yeah.
And we all, bought Lambos during the 2017 when it spiked. Yeah. And then, and then a lot of people lost a lot of money and all that. But at the end of the day, everyone who's gone into it and is starting companies and really putting effort into it, there's just too many of them. It won't die, fully at this point, just because it's kind of so entrenched.
Does it have a future beyond just being like the first one to do it? And so, because you said people keep buying Bitcoin every time a new crypto comes out that has like the potential, right? So they're buying into like the brand name of Bitcoin as itself, but it itself really doesn't have a future. Is that what you're saying?
That would be my hypothesis.
Yeah.
That would be my belief. And one of the other things about Bitcoin is it has this very hardcore culture to it. This isn't in the actual code, but the people who, in a decentralized fashion, all of the stakeholders in Bitcoin who collectively make this call, it's no individual, tend to have this feeling that we shouldn't change much about the core protocol. That we released it, it's worked, no one's hacked it in 10 years, which is an amazing feat, if you really think about it. And therefore, let's not change it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and, but every other new crypto that comes out does try to change it, is more secure, is better in a lot of tangible ways.
And that's kind of the question: is that old style mentality correct? Maybe we shouldn't have constant upgrades and versioning on software, for example. Anyone who has a phone or has used Facebook and they constantly change things around on you, and you don't have a choice. Maybe the better option was Facebook was perfect in 2011 and it's gotten worse since then, and that type of thing. Or Windows, etc. So, that's their argument. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, but Bitcoin doesn't do anything and nobody's using it after 10 years. Great, you haven't been hacked. Cool. But maybe it's not actually meeting the needs of what it was built or designed to do.
It was the launch pad, and that's kind of what it is now still. It was the launch pad.
And there's all these ways they're trying to make that work too. Is they do something called layer 2 for scaling. So Bitcoin right now can process, I think, 2 transactions per second, which is Visa goes through about 50,000 a second. And so if you want to be a real currency, Visa is also only a small segment of the world. If you want to be the world currency, that's way too slow. And so they say, all right, well, never mind on the blockchain thing. We'll create this complicated system of ways to trust centralized players. All acting on their own. And it's like, wait a second.
So it's completely circumventing like its original purpose.
Right. But don't change the protocol. And so it's sort of one of those like, well, you're relying on the old methods to fix the new one rather than using the new one to fix the old problems. We'll see. And, a lot of people disagree with me, and especially the Bitcoin community, but yeah, and that's kind of the gist of it.
I don't know them, and I know you, so you're right.
That's what I keep telling my girlfriend.
Earlier, you were talking about a stock certificate and like using that in the blockchain. This is just another like misconception that a lot of people have, is that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a lot like stocks, and that like the more you buy, the higher it goes up, the more you sell, the more it goes down. That does kind of happen. Can you explain just like the differences there, how it's not a stock?
Well, I should say it this way: like a token is just a symbol, right? It's
Yeah.
just a representation of something else. So it could be a stock.
Yeah.
And that's some of the movement that is happening.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin itself is not a stock. You don't have any stock shareholder rights. There's no board of directors. There's no necessarily even product being delivered. There's no source of income.
It's not a company.
Yeah, it's not a company. And a lot of this actually is legal in nature. Is the fact that corporations are a legal fiction. That's what a corporation is at the end of the day. It's a series of contracts based around the way we made law.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with, I don't want to say it has nothing to do, but that structure is enforced at the legal layer. Bitcoin's enforced at the blockchain layer, and it's just fundamentally different. Yeah. And so you could spin up a token that represents the rights in those contracts, and if the courts come around and recognize those as compelling, as the correct way to run a business, you could totally issue stock on the blockchain.
Yeah.
But what we're also seeing, or at least we saw a couple of years ago, we're seeing less of it now, is that you have fully centralized companies that do everything correctly on the legal front, that then raise money by selling these magical tokens. Yeah. That literally do nothing. Yeah. And there's some big name companies, Kodak. Kick and Facebook. What I last heard is doing the same thing, and they're just literally printing money and selling it to these people who don't get crypto. And they're like, oh, well, now I own Kickstock. It's like, you don't own Kickstock. You bought some units on some smart contract that they made, and it does nothing.
Yeah, and you own nothing.
Yeah, you own nothing. and for some reason...
It's worth whatever they tell you, and then maybe if you try to sell it, it'll be worth that much. Yeah.
To be fair, that's what the government does with
currency. That's kind of what I was thinking too. I'm like, wait, isn't that just what the Fed does?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Actually, can we address that real quick?
Yeah.
Can we actually explain? I don't know. I'm not super informed on how currency works, but I have a vague
memes
idea.
inform me. They print money, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, will you explain, to the best of your knowledge,
how the Federal Reserve works?
How the Federal Reserve.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, this is a fun one. So, I mean, my understanding in 2009 was that you got 7 people who were not directly answerable to the government that got together and just whimsically decided what to do with all of our houses.
One of which may soon be Herman Cain.
Yeah. In reality, first of all, it is answerable to the government, as we're seeing right there. Yeah. But on top of it, the Fed essentially works by... changing interest rates. And the whole belief is that if you make a higher interest rate, that causes value creation, because someone loans it at 3%, they get $1.03 back. Value needed to be created to support that extra 3 cents. And so rather than thinking of it as money being created, you're incentivizing new value to be formed, out of small businesses that are taking loans and that type of stuff. And so that's kind of how the Fed works, is if the economy is slowing, then they decrease the interest rates. That isn't so much worried about the concentration of capital, but at least it's getting people back into straight investment. But if the interest rate goes up, then they got to slow down deflation. So then they increase the interest rate. Sorry, I realized how technical this has already gotten.
No, I get it. It's basically like, well, do this. Oh, that's not working. Do this. Well, okay.
And, I mean, they've got a very, very educated group of people that are coming together. And it is, well, the heads, several heads of it are nominated by the government. Several heads of it are not. They're actually the heads of private banks. That are coming together, and they're all kind of cooperating and saying, all right, well, everyone uses money. How do we make sure that their lives go on and they can still use money? And sometimes they get it wrong. But, more and more I've gotten into it, I'm realizing there's one benefit to how it all works, is that they really are the top of the game at this. These are the PhDs in econ that really know what they're talking about, that have tested this for a long time, and are dictating things. On the other side, every time there's a crisis, you get this political force on it that changes the rules on them, not necessarily as well informed, and then it just has all of these repercussions that we don't foresee, 5 or 10 years later type of thing. And that's maybe the problem of having it intertwined with government, is that ultimately it's answerable to the political system. So that's kind of it. Are they better guesses than Satoshi Nakamoto? Probably, quite frankly. They're much better at guessing that type of stuff. But is there a chance that maybe we can unlock it so that instead of just 7 professors, any professor with a certain degree of credibility can weigh in and have influence? Maybe. I don't know if that'd even work, but we'll find out. And that's some of the projects that are going on as well. So yeah, end of the day, Bitcoin, they now are trying to be the digital gold where it's all going to be released at a certain rate, and let prices fluctuate, kind of like how gold is. And you just turn on and you're like, there's a reason the world left gold. Like, it wasn't that great in the 1880s and the 1910s, the 1930s. There was a lot of real bad breaks that happened because we were trying to tie it to something that's fungible. Whereas now, if we have this flexibility that can adjust, it can create much longer periods of stability.
Yeah.
And then they go to Bitcoin. They're like, oh, it's so volatile. It's like, well, gold was volatile, once upon a time. And
well, that's the biggest problem people have with the Fed is that like it's so hard to understand that. Well, first of all, money is nothing but a concept to begin with.
Yeah.
And then we tied it to this physical thing in gold. People like that. They like being able to think like my money is tied to this thing I can touch. Yeah. And now it's like it hasn't been like that in almost 100 years. And they don't get that it's like that's really all it is just a concept that allows us to trade things.
Yeah.
And that's really all it is. And people don't like that because they're like, well, who determines how much of my paper I can trade for that speaker? You know what I mean? Like, they just don't like that idea in their head. It's like hard to wrap around, and that's the problem they have with cryptocurrency because it's even more removed from what they feel is real.
And it's almost ironic that the cryptocurrency is trying to be gold.
Yeah, that's actually super ironic, actually. Yeah,
it's like, oh, we don't trust gold. All right, we'll have people doing it. We don't trust people. We'll have computers doing it. Well, wait, I trust those people. Oh, no, we're really trying to be gold with computers. And it's like...
Well, maybe that's why it's trying to loop around to be gold, because then it gives people an idea of, like, it's tangible.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest issue, is that it's not tangible, but then you look at government-issued fiat currency, it's not intangible either.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, it's just,
We live in a simulation, okay? Like, that's all it is.
Yeah, there's this theory of modern monetary theory, which has been going on for about 15 years, primarily coming out of Australia, some of the top universities down there. And basically what it says is that the government doesn't need to tax if it's issuing the currency, because they can just print up more money.
Yeah.
And so long as they're not witnessing really bad degrees of inflation or deflation, they can just print as much money as they wanted to pay as many of their bills as they need to.
Yeah.
And so it kind of turns the
that
whole...
That sounds crazy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And what it is that on one side you have whatever the entity that is creating the money creates it, and then the tax serves as a way that you can decrease the money supply to maintain the stability.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you want more welfare or you want more guns, it doesn't matter. They just print it. As long as they're taxing at a rate that can then burn enough currency and maintain the supply and demand.
Yeah, so taxes are essentially them trying to correct problems they create for themselves.
Right, yeah, more or less.
I love it.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's so funny, then this theory is new, it's considered somewhat radical, and so a lot of people don't believe it, but when you actually look at how everything's going, it seems to fit directly into
it makes total sense to me. It's like, that's really what they're doing. They're just trying to fix their own problem by raising or lowering taxes so then they can collect more of the money that they accidentally issued.
Right, yeah, and it keeps it all in balance, and so it doesn't matter whether, they could, in theory, be borrowing all up to the level until the point that servicing the loans would cause inflation. That's where the bar is at that point, but... everyone's like $20 trillion worth of debt. That doesn't matter as long as they're not paying very much every month. They could just spin that out for infinity.
That's something too that it would take. I feel like it would take like a long time and go off on a tangent, but to explain the debt economy to people, like that's something else. That's the thing. It's like we're like what $20 trillion in debt. To who?
Yeah. And what is that? Do we have to pay it back?
Yeah. Well, not really, actually.
Really, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like actually the more debt we have, the more our money's worth. Weird that works that way. What? No.
Yeah, and that's exactly
because that means people trust us to pay back the loan, even though we never have to pay back the loan. So then we get more in debt, then our money's worth more.
Yeah, and then when we pay them back, they're like, "Hey, you owe me money." It's like, "Well, hold on, let me run my Epson real quick. Here's some dollars." And so it's fascinating to think of it that way, and you've got people who disagree even in the government, and then you get people like AOC who come along and say, "Whoa, this is an interesting theory. All right, let's just start spending all the money." You know?
Exactly.
And it's like,
let's spend all the money on all the things because we can.
Yeah, because if MMT is true, that means we have severely underborrowed.
Yeah.
And so let's just start, let's give everyone money, that type of thing. And, and then you get the other side of it. It's like, well, if you give everyone money, is that going to be its own problem?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, it turns out there's probably
It's probably
going to
be a problem.
I'm all for it. Just deflate the currency so it's worth nothing, and then we
Yeah.
can just start a new thing. And
Yeah, you feel the Mad Max, just restart everything.
Well,
Dude, I got the football pads with spikes on them already. Like I'm waiting. Like that's all I want.
I got my leash. I'm waiting for someone to get on the other end of it.
Dude, seriously, yeah.
Well,
I want to be that guy from Mad Max and like the Jason mask, just like come out to play. Like it's like I want to be that guy so bad. Like
part of the ideal of Bitcoin though is that the people with power currently who have all the money have control and influence over the policy of how the money is spent to keep the power their power. And Bitcoin is like, fuck you, we made our own money. So if you did have a collapse of like, let's say the US, not that this would be good for
it'd actually be really bad for us.
But in theory,
in theory,
it'd be great for me. I'd be holding the Bitcoin.
Overlord.
If the actual amount of like what a dollar is worth to people changed, like let's say what's happening in Venezuela, where the money's just not worth anything anymore. If that happened with the US dollar, like all the people with all the money, where's their power now?
Well, I mean, at a very core level, it's do they own a mine? A mine or a farm or something like that. Something where real resources, they'll always have value. Those people, unless you have a full-on, Cuban Revolution where they just say, oh, you don't own that factory anymore. And that type of thing. If you have if you have an open access system taking over the old system, people in the old system, a lot of them anyways, will probably hold the power in the new system. Which is something I think.
Well, that's like exactly what happened in like the French Revolution, right? They killed a bunch of them, but then still a lot of people with the old power still had power, and then we're back to square one.
American Revolution.
Same deal.
All the way up and down. Even Cuban Revolution. So and that's kind of part of it is that I think there's sort of an us and them mentality. Is like, oh, those people have power, and they are in no way actually connected to me. And then you actually go out and you're like, wait a sec, they just. They were running a better liquor store than I was, and now they started 7-Eleven type of thing, and now their son's a congressman, and that's how the world actually works. So, and then on top of it, in Bitcoin even you see it is that we've found out now that Elon Musk and Jack from Twitter and the government of North Korea all got into Bitcoin really early, and and so now they're some of the biggest whales in the crypto space. And these are the exact people that everyone was kind of like, hey, these are the rich asshole government corporate people. We were supposed to be sticking it to them. They just said, oh, well, I went in and bought some Bitcoin, and there they are.
Yeah, and that's again, it's just like what you said. Like the people with power before just have power now because money is power, and this is new money, and there we are.
So I think the ideas of it'll shake things up, and maybe you can come up with ways structurally where that instead of just having one government agency running housing development, maybe you have 4 or 5 different systems that kind of compete with each other, and instead of having 3 companies that are running U.S. banking, maybe it's 6, and maybe we can figure out how to instill that at a structural level to just sort of create more competition and spread it out a little more than it currently is. That to me is the ideal dream. Not that everyone's going to be, one single class of people and everyone owns all the banks and everyone's their own bank kind of thing necessarily. But yeah.
Okay. I want to get back into what we were talking about initially when you were talking about the crypto you're developing for the sex workers and like helping them like break away from the pimps and like all the negative aspects of their job. Like, go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of a big one. So sex work is what they say is the oldest profession in the world. For better or worse, it's both one of the most stigmatized as well as one that's clearly not going anywhere. People aren't going to stop paying for sexually related things. And unfortunately, though, because there's all of these laws against it, one of the first things that drop off when something is illegitimized is that the banking falls off. If you hold your money in a Chase account and they find out you're making a cam show out of your living room type of thing, they will freeze your funds for up to 6 months, sometimes longer if they have some sort of extra investigation going on. And for a lot of these women, that can put them literally out of work overnight. And bankrupt. They can't even afford rent, can't afford to feed their kids, can't afford whatever. And so now they need to depend on someone to give them stability. And so that dependence comes, you have these individuals that then provide this dependence. And they also provide other things that they usually can't provide themselves. Security, physical security. They can't call the police, so now they need to call someone to go get the money that somebody owes them. And you get these very skewed power dynamics in these relationships. There's going to be sex workers, and if you accept that, then you can realize that if the government's not going to protect them, somebody will. And if the banks aren't going to bank them, somebody will. And if and so on and so forth. And that's what causes a lot of the negative things that are associated with sex working, the trafficking, the children workers, even immigration. There's a large argument for that it helps drive immigration, and the cartels have actually figured out how to be the security providers in these situations, and it's just one more giant revenue stream for them that every time we make it harder on sex workers, it just ultimately pads their bottom line because they fill in for what the government and the banks weren't doing before. So one of the companies I work with is called Spank Chain. And
sounds great.
Yeah, Spank Chain.
Very good branding.
Spank Chain started off as a one of the providers where you can go on as a cam girl, and do your shows, and you can have people watching it, and they can tip you in cryptocurrencies. What they then realized they needed to do next was they couldn't have everyone trading in Ether because it was too volatile. It was the same problem we were talking about with the money. So they figured out a kind of convoluted way to peg their secondary token, which they call the booty coin.
I love these names.
Right. Yeah.
They're so good.
You can peg your booty to the dollar. And
marketing, man.
What's
so good.
Fascinating though is we've seen a whole movement of sex workers that don't even use the cam website because nobody goes to it. There aren't any guys at home going to Spank Chain Live, to have fun. But you still have sex workers that are moving all their money into booty anyways, because now they don't have to worry about it getting shut down the next day.
Yeah.
And they can, it's easy enough for them to use. Their industry is already starting to move around it, so they can start paying each other and paying for certain services to help their own need. And it takes that entire pressure off of what traditionally was a service that pimps and drug cartels and gangs and the like would provide. Which I think is fucking cool. Is the fact that we've got computers doing what traditionally people that we didn't want to do something were doing.
Joel's got a cool face. Who controls the currency exchange of booty coin into the dollar then?
It's algorithmically set. And like I said, it's not perfect. And I've talked to them a lot about reasons why it could, the black swan cases where it might not work out. But so far, it's been working fine. And in the sex workers case, it's working more consistently than PayPal can. But PayPal will shut down your account.
The company, this company is actually doing the exchange though.
No, it's all going through smart contracts. So it mints and deletes booties based on fluctuation against the dollar, and it can feed information for that. And then as users use the service, it can mint or burn them in a way to make sure that there's always enough dollars somewhere.
Okay. I was just wondering, what is preventing Wells Fargo or whatever
from shutting down Spank Chain?
From being like, oh, you're using...
Oh, they already shut down Spank Chain. They bank everything now in digital currency. And so and that was part of the problem is, they raised a few $1 million but they had to hold it in Ether or Bitcoin, and the market tanked. And so now they have half as much as they had before.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're really on the cutting edge because they have the business need driving them to be using these technologies. Because everything that can happen to the sex workers can also happen to Spank Chain, by the way, as the company. So they're the ones that are really testing and advancing that. So yeah, for the booty spank pair, there's a whole system inside of it so that whenever someone brings $1 worth of value to the system, they're issued one of the booties that's pegged to $1. It's kind of out there.
I love it.
And what's cool about them was while they tried to become the video service, they've now actually had a lot of hits from the other sex work platforms, the Pornhubs and the Brazzers and those types coming out saying, hey, you know what? We're sick of Visa. We're sick of putting up with this. How do we just upload your payment system? We don't care about everything else you've done, but we need this payment system.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see it catch on that way. And that's really cool.
No, that's the way it has to be. It has to be people who absolutely need this thing to work, who will make it work.
Yeah. And they say porn advances technology. I think this is one of the very...
This is literally that happening.
Yeah, and on the street level.
Yeah.
And, so when you're talking about the coolest things I've ever done, the other side note of hanging out with that crowd is we go over to the Spank, it's called the Spank House.
Yeah.
And
does it smell really good?
Oh, they have dildo soap. Like, it's this little spot on the beach in Marina Del Rey.
Yeah.
And you go in, and the house is set up so it's half a programmer's paradise and half a gamer's paradise.
Yeah.
You got all these nerds in there, gaming and programming. That's all they do. They do that just 24/7. And then you just got like Janice Griffith and Brenna Sparks and Caden Cross just running around the house too.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's like, this is the future I wanted.
Yeah.
This is the future I wanted when I was 12 yees old, and here it is.
Yeah, here it is. Like, this place exists in the world.
This place exists now, and I'm a part of it.
Yeah. Like, and here I am telling them that I want to be their lawyer.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love it.
Before we leave the topic of sex trade, like you did briefly mention one of the problems with sex work being underground and not having like police to turn to. This is one of the things that actually allows things like child pornography and things and sex trafficking to happen. I just want to distinguish, because we've had this conversation before. You're not working with like people that are endorsing like sex trafficking, forced.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
That who you're working with are women that are basically trying to run their own business as themselves, as a brand.
Their own finances and
empowering
enabling
them.
Yeah, there's a potential that a large portion of the women that are in, what you could call undesirable circumstances, that a small segment of them, this alone will help them climb out of that hole.
Yeah.
And I didn't elaborate enough. Where the traffickers or the pimps come into play is that they have a stable of workers that they form relationships with. And if one of them gets cut off of the financial system, they come in and they give loans, and they make sure that they make the rent, and they make sure that they get fed. But now they're owed a favor, and that can turn into all kinds of things.
It's usually indentured servitude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of it, is that one specific function of pimps acting as a bank or as a lender of last resort. We're taking over that function. So that's kind of how it's minimizing the trafficking and that type of stuff. At least it's taking out one of the economic forces for why it exists.
That's really good. We talked about this briefly when I first asked you to do this. You're like, I'm not just the Bitcoin guy. I'm like, I know you're not just the Bitcoin guy, but look at your shirt.
Yeah. Also the other coin and the Ethereum guy and the Ripple guy.
I was gonna say, like, what other ventures or even like interests like would you like to talk about with the last few minutes of the podcast here? Like,
oh God, yeah. When I'm not brewing crypto, I'm brewing beer. That's been one where I started the beer club at the law school.
That's cool.
Called Barley Legal, and leave it to the law students.
Joel, we need a.
But
okay.
I'll get on the drum kit after. We'll
thank you.
But yeah, I've been brewing for the last 7 years, and I like to drink, which is really hard this month because we talked about this before the show. But right now I'm in no alcohol April, and
it's a big movement, everybody. It's
a
really,
really
big movement.
Yeah. It's something that's definitely not just something that I made up to get my girlfriend to stop drinking for a little bit.
I would like to say, since you got in on Bitcoin early and I didn't, I'm just gonna jump on this train because you seem to know what you're doing.
You'll be buying Lambos as of May.
Yeah, it'll be so good.
So just don't drink through April. I'll have a
Lambo.
Oh, I always hear these people like, I took some time off and like I'm cool now, and maybe I won't drink anymore. I'm like, dude, this has been the longest month ever. It's not that I've had trouble not drinking. Yeah. It's just now I just go home and watch Friends. And like, it's like we go out, everyone's drinking at the bar, and like gets to 10 p.m. and we're tired, and like we go out hiking, we work out, and we're like, God, but this would be so much better if we had a couple Coronas, But yeah, so I've been brewing for a long time. I'm involved with one of the breweries in Orange County.
Okay, cool.
So everyone down in Santa Ana, you should go check out Network Brewery. It's over on Red Hill. And it's a very fun one.
This podcast also sponsored by Network Brewery in Santa Ana.
Shameless plug there. Try the San Diego Creek Red Velvet beer. Super good. It's a chai tea.
Chai tea beer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how the dude makes it, but that's why I got involved with that one. Was that beer?
Yeah. No, that's definitely like a very interesting little combo. Like, I don't even like beer, and I'm like, I might try that because that's weird.
Yeah. It tastes like a red velvet cake. It's delicious.
Ooh. Okay. Jason, where can people find you on the web if they wanted to contact you about random things or anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, for starters, you can find me on Twitter. It's at Jason the Healer.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just hopefully Ben spells my name right when he posts this up.
I'm gonna really try.
It'll probably be Joel. Actually,
it's actually
he does
gonna
everything.
Be Joel.
Yeah,
it's actually gonna be Joel. Yeah.
And I'm on most of the platforms. I didn't do the Instagram or the Snapchat or any of the kids ones, but LinkedIn, Facebook, everything else. Google. You just Google my name. You'll find something. I think that's about it. Definitely follow me on Twitter if you're interested in all this crypto or legal stuff. Otherwise.
And that's you said Jason the Healer?
Yeah.
Like underscores or
nope.
No, just
all one word. Yep.
To close, I'd really like to ask you, Jason. So we all joined Mensa for different reasons. We all stay in this fantastic house of mirrors for different reasons. Why are you here? Why did you join? How do you feel about Mensa in general?
Well, from pretty early on, I think, for a lot of people in Mensa, it's kind of a familial thing. They've got parents who are in it. They were very hardcore into it. Kids come into it. And there's kind of a whole clique within Mensa of people that are on those terms. I was from one of those families where neither of the parents got in and had always kind of wanted to. And so from a very early age, was sort of we do some of the practice tests that you find in emails or whatever for Mensa. We do those at the breakfast table when I was like 3, and and we're kind of gearing up, and it was something that the folks always wanted. And somewhere I was like, all right, screw it, let's take the test. And I guess that's why I took it, was just sort of, I didn't know why not to. Then when I got there, and it was just a bunch of dysfunctional, very smart people that are doing all kinds of things. You get everything from attorneys and engineers and scientists and doctors all the way down to Ben, and and the whole gamut in between. But
my life is a joke.
No, just kidding.
No, you're not.
But yeah, and so I think hanging out, everything I do in life right now is I'm either hanging out with attorneys and they're all talking about law and lawyers and their last case and what the argument and the trouble they had with some judge, and then you get to the cryptocurrency side. Everyone's talking about the latest thing that they're installing or thing they're working on, and it's all focused, it's hyper focused on this crypto, and they're all very smart people. But then you say, hey, so what do you do in your free time? And maybe a couple have interest, but they don't really want to tell you your work associate, and it's just really nice to have a group of people that there isn't really any expectations. You don't have to go to the meetings. You can. You don't have to even necessarily pay dues. Apparently, you can.
You should.
You should. And it's just a lot of people doing things that are just so far outside of what I'm actually involved with on my day to day. It's nice to just have that feed in, so I'm not just, 1 or 2 dimensional kind of person. So I think that's a big part of it. And to vindicate Ben a little bit, I think a big part is also the meme culture is top notch in Mensa.
Really good.
I mean, all of the best memes you're just now saying we had a month and a half ago. Like,
seriously.
Yeah, the edgiest people. But yeah, and also, in my profession, I travel a lot, and so I can go to New Orleans and just post in one of the boards and say, hey, who in New Orleans wants to get together or has a couch, or, who in Las Vegas, and, who in New York. I made some of my closest friends just from doing that, and then going and knowing that not only do I have someone that I know in town wherever I'm going, but there's someone who's smart and interested in nerdy stuff and, would take me to, or potentially take me to the kinds of things that I might like as well without even knowing that I like them beforehand. So I think that's a big value add to the whole society. So yeah, that's kind of what got me in, why I'm there, and why you should probably think about joining too if any of that appeals to you.
Okay. Well, that's good. That'll be it for today. The first episode of Table in Latin. Again, just Google it. It's a good name.
I like Spanish Idiot better.
Yeah, that's also something I found out very recently. But yeah, Table in Latin, Spanish Idiot. We'll go with one of those. Let's just assume that it's going to be Table in Latin. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. From myself, Joel, Jason. Bye.
See you at the AG.
See you at the AG. Oh, that's right. See you at the AG. you don't get to know what that is until you join.